Hi, so this is my reflective vlog where I will talk about the teaching, learning, practice, and application of what I learned in the workshops to produce my submitted TV package. Now, first of all, I want to talk about what I have learned this term. Now, I basically went into second year already sort of familiar with Premiere Pro, being able to cut OOVs and SOTs and basically produce tiny little TV pieces of 15 to 30 seconds, or let's say 45 to 50 seconds if we put the OOV and SOT together. So basically, what I learned this term was to be more effective in terms of putting together these different elements like sequences and interview clips and even pieces to camera, and then string them together to produce a full 1 minute 30 package, which basically consists of different sequences, different OOVs, and different SOTs. The challenges I faced were definitely involving COVID and coronavirus. So it was very difficult to obtain interviews when the only way to request interviews is basically to send emails or make phone calls, because most of the time you either don't get a reply via email or people just tell you that they will call you back and then they never do. So that was quite difficult. And personal wins were definitely when you're finally able to get that interview you need for your story, and when that interview pans out well, when you get all the information you need, you already know in your head what your TV package will look like when you've already got an idea of how what sort of shots you're going to take, and how you already know in your head what that package will look like. So how have I worked on and developed my skills away from the workshops? Well, I suppose mostly by doing the workshop exercises we did, because we obviously had the blended approach. At the start of the term was all online, so we had to do the exercises from home. And so I guess that was a way to kind of enhance my skills from outside the workshop, although that is kind of part of the workshop. In terms of story ideas, I had multiple story ideas. So most of them were revolving around the roadmap out of lockdown. So I was thinking, okay, so what does this roadmap mean for restaurants? What does it mean for pubs, for cafes? Could I talk to someone about how viable it is for them to reopen on the 12th of April instead of the 17th of May, or vice versa? And other ideas were maybe approaching local sports clubs, because they were able to restart activities earlier, which is eventually what I did. I started trying to get interviews for that restaurant pub story about reopening on the 12th of April, which was very difficult because many pubs at that time were very busy. So rarely ever a pub actually replied to my emails. And when they did, they usually did not reply to the following email, or had some other issues, like weren't able to use Zoom, or they weren't comfortable with being recorded or something like that. Or they were happy to do an interview, but they were part of a chain, and so they were not allowed to talk on behalf of that chain. So those were the issues I faced. And usually when I was making phone calls, people just said that they would call back, that they want my email address, that I should send them an email with more details, and then they just usually just ignored the email. Now how I went about to get my interview for the Lincoln City Women TV package, which is eventually the one I will submit. I contacted the media officer of Lincoln City Women, Beth Pritchard, who used to be a student at the university, and by getting involved with LSJ News, I already had her contact details, and so it was very easy to ask for an interview. And so that went quite well, and I did get the interview I wanted. and everything went quite smoothly with that. The only issue was kind of get shots and clips to illustrate the package, which I eventually did through Aaron Mayo, who's the editor of LSJ News, because he went to a lot of Lincoln City women games and he had footage that he took from games. And so he sent me a link to a YouTube video with plenty of footage, plenty of clips that I could use from a Lincoln City women's game. So what are we going to see? So I spoke for my TV package, I spoke to a player from Lincoln City Women. So we will hear her views on how it's been to come out of lockdown, what sort of impact that has had on her mental health, and what her impressions were during lockdown, how she coped with all the restrictions and not being able to train and play games and all that sort of stuff. In terms of pictures, I took some shots of the pitch next to the sports center because I thought it would fit kind of that football narrative. And I also took some shots of the sports center to just illustrate that it also involves, at least when it comes to opening on the 12th of April, that it also involves fitness centers and other athletic activities that kind of were able to reopen late March and mid-April. I also included 2 clips from games for Lincoln City Women, which I've already mentioned. I got from Aaron Mayu. And so when we talk about personal areas of improvement in terms of radio and TV skills, I think when it comes to TV, it's definitely about being more confident in front of the camera. I'm still very reliant on scripts. It's very difficult to me to just look in the camera and speak freely, because whenever like a recording starts, I just kind of choke and kind of I just black out in my head, and it's difficult for me to just basically to speak in full sentences. It just vanishes everything in front of my eyes, and then it's about getting more confident. And in terms of radio, I think I feel quite comfortable with radio because everything is it's easier to script because you don't have to look into a camera, and so I think I'm more prepared for radio pieces. I guess that will be more of an issue when it comes to like 2 ways, which we did in first term, or as lives, or even live 2 ways, where obviously you have to speak more freely. But again, with radio, it might, because you're not in vision, it might be easier to get more help from a script and bullet point notes. So what I want to work on is definitely becoming more confident from the camera and being able to find adequate shots for stories that kind of tell the story and illustrate what I wrote up in my cues, what I'm presenting. So so this was my reflective vlog, and yes, I hope this gave you an idea of how I went about producing this package and what my experiences were over the last term.